Okay, so in this series we're going to cover what to expect when you turn up for your NPTC assessments. We're going to cover chainsaw maintenance and cross-cutting, tree felling up to 380mm, tree climbing and aerial rescue, and the use of chainsaw from rope and harness. So in this video, we're going to cover what to expect when you turn up for your NPTC chainsaw maintenance and cross-cutting assessment. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do as part of the assessment, you're going to have a meet and greet with your assessor. Okay, and don't forget your assessor's there to try and calm any nerves down that you may have gained prior to turning up to this point. Okay, this assessment, it's theory based and it's practical based. So the first part of the assessment itself, okay, the assessor will ask you some questions and you'll go through the sort of maintenance side of the chainsaw at that point. Once the assessor's happy that you've met the criteria, you'll then move outside and you'll start cutting some timber with the saw itself, doing some cross-cutting elements of the assessment. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the kit that you are going to need on the day. Okay, so the kit you're going to need to carry out your chainsaw maintenance and cross-cutting assessment. Okay, let's start off with a bit of PPE. You're going to need some chainsaw protected trousers, some chainsaw protected boots, some gloves suitable for the task itself, a helmet with a visor to protect the face and eyes, some suitable ear protection. Okay, and part of this assessment as well, you're required to have a personal first aid kit on, a little bit like this one here. Okay, and the tool for the job. Okay, so for this assessment, you require a petrol driven chainsaw. Okay, for this one, we're going to be using the MS261. This is what I like to use on training and assessments. Suitable bar length is recommended up to sort of 15-inch. On this one we have got a 16-inch bar on, and that's only because this one goes from 14 to sort of 16. But yeah, a required saw, and this one's suitable for the task. Okay, maintenance kit. So for the maintenance kit, you're going to need some sharpening kit here, just like this. Comes in a pack ready to go. Okay, a combi spanner and Allen keys and screwdrivers, which comes with the saw anyway, but you're going to need all that to carry out your maintenance assessment. And what we got here is a maintenance kit, which is a cleaning kit with a brush and a bar groove cleaner and like a spray to get any debris or sap that's stuck to the saw itself and gives it a really good clean. Okay, so this is sort of the minimum sort of requirements we're going to need to carry out this assessment. Okay, so the first part of your assessment, your assessor will ask you some theory questions, and then you need to bear in mind for this assessment in particular, this is a little bit theory based and practical. There are practical elements of it, but what I mean by this is the assessor is going to ask you questions throughout the maintenance process, okay, which you'll be practically moving, taking parts from the chainsaw itself, but then you'll have to answer some questions at the same time as well, which the assessor will ask you. Okay, first part of the question base though is all going to be about safety. Okay, so you'll go through your risk assessment process, emergency procedures, then you're going to ask questions, be asked questions on some certain legislation around the use of chainsaws, and then you're going to talk about industry guides that are available to use. Okay, moving on from that point, you're going to go straight into the 10 safety features of the chainsaw itself. Okay, so let's go there. So for this part of the assessment then, what you'll be expected to tell your assessor is the 10 safety features of the chainsaw and what their functions are. And the way I've always done this is start at the rear of the saw, I'll work myself around, okay, and I end up back at the rear. That's logically how it works for me, okay. So starting at the rear, we start off here with the on and off switch, okay, which switches the saw off, okay, cutting all power to the saw. Moving forward, you got this part here, which is your chain brake and front hand protection, okay, and when that's engaged, it will stop the chain going around the actual bar itself. Opening it up, you got your exhaust with the muffler pointing away from the operator, so no fumes are going to the operator itself, okay. Here we have our scabbard, okay, so protecting the bar and chain, okay, and it also protects anyone being cut by the sharp elements of the chain itself, and it protects the gear in the vehicles, so the chain's not going to get caught on anything and ripping any gear, okay. So that is the scabbard. You'll have the chain with the low kickback characteristics of the chain itself, okay. Put that scabbard back on. Moving around the chainsaw then, so underneath we've got this here, which is the chain catcher. So if the chain was to derail, okay, this is going to catch the chain. From there, we've got the AV mounts, the anti-vibration mounts. You'll have one here, and you'll also have another one on the handle here, okay, and this is designed to reduce the amount of vibration that the saw puts out. Coming all back down round to the rear now, you've got your rear hand protection, which is here, which protects your rear hand, okay. Your sticker decals here, which will give you some information about the safety elements or what's required when you're using these saw. And last but not least, you'll have your anti-throttle lockout, which is here, okay. Some people call it the dead man's handle, okay, which is the trigger here. You won't be able to operate the trigger unless you pull this down, okay. And they are your 10 safety features of this chainsaw. And don't forget, they may look a little bit different depending on the type of chainsaw that you bring to the assessment itself. Once you've answered all the questions regarding the safety features of the chainsaw itself, your assessor then is going to ask you a few questions on battery powered units, okay. And the reason behind this now is a lot of companies like STIHL, Husqvarna and other sort of brands out there, they've really invested in their battery powered market, okay, and some of them are good as the power that we have of this one here, okay. The questions are going to be along the lines of the hazards associated with battery powered units, the maintenance when it comes to using battery powered chainsaws, and the benefits of using battery powered chainsaws. And don't forget, all this is going to be covered in your training before you even get to this point. For the next part of the assessment then, you'll be expected to carry out general maintenance on the chainsaw that you brought, okay. Obviously the saw that we're using today is the MS261, and depending on what chainsaw you brought will depend on what type of questions the assessor is going to ask you, okay. They're all generally pretty much the same though, okay. So for this one, I'm just going to take the top cover off here, okay. And the questions you're going to be asked here is on the air filter. From here, you'll be expected to take the air filter off and ask any questions regarding the air filter itself and general maintenance of the air filter, okay. Moving on to the spark plug, which is here. You'll be expected to take the spark plug out, talk about key elements of the spark plug itself and the general maintenance of the spark plug. From that point, we're going to the cooling system, which is at the top here. Again, what the cooling system does and general maintenance of the cooling system itself, okay. And what I generally do from that point is go straight and move on to the starter mechanism of the saw itself, okay. So from here, which is the side, you'll be expected to take these off, which is a star. It's quite stiff. And what I generally tell people on this assessment is, if you get the top cover here, just turn it upside down, and any loose parts of the saw itself, just put in that top cap there. It just minimises any chance of you losing any of the loose parts. Okay, so with the starter mechanism, again, you'll be expected to talk about the general maintenance of the starter mechanism. Okay, because the side case here does tend to get a load of debris inside it. Okay, you'll be expected to detension and retension the pull cord itself, talk about general maintenance of the pull cord. Okay, and again, all this is going to be covered on your training prior to even getting to this point. Okay, and this is the starter mechanism of the chainsaw. Okay, putting all this back together. Again, at this point, just make sure that you keep any loose sort of bolts, okay, safe, just so you don't lose anything, because the last thing you want to do is lose something on your assessment, okay, which may terminate that assessment. So once we're sort of happy with this side of the saw, get this last bolt in. So once I'm happy with this, we'll then put the top cover back on and go straight into asking questions about the fuel filter and oil filter. On the day of the assessment itself, when it comes to the fuel filter and oil filter, you will not be expected to take them apart, okay? But you'll be expected to ask questions on how you get the fuel filter out, and general maintenance and cleaning of the fuel filter, and exactly the same when it comes to the oil filter. Okay, so you'll be again expected to explain general maintenance, what it does, and how you could change it if necessary. Okay, again, you won't be expected to do that on a day, but you will be expected to answer the questions regarding this part. Okay, moving on. So once all that's been put back together, okay, what we're going to go into is going into talking about the clutch system and the sprocket system. To do this, you'll be expected to take this side case off here, which will include taking the bar and the chain off. And anything you do with the chain, okay, you'll be expected to wear gloves when you are doing that. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to quickly put my gloves on. Okay, so loosening the chain, I'm just going to loosen these bolts here. You don't have to take the scabbard off for this, you just need to loosen these. Just loosen them enough, okay, to start loosening the chain. And just a quick recommendation on this one, when you actually detension the chain, tension it all the way back, because what I've found in the past is people really struggle to put the bar back on, and it's generally because they haven't put the detensioning bolt all the way back, and they forget at that stage and like, oh, what's happening, why is it not going on? Okay, so I've done it all the way back. Now I can loosen the rest of it once you get it to hand tight. Okay, side case off. Okay, and then bar and chain. Take the rear of the chain off the sprocket, like so, and you can just keep that out of the way until you ask questions on that side of things. Okay, so on your training, you'll be taught different types of sprocket systems, different type of clutch systems, etc. Okay, and again, you'll be asked questions on the relevant sprocket system and clutch system that you've got on your chainsaw. Okay, so on this one here, we've got a sprocket here. This is called a rim sprocket, which is this part here. Okay, and you've got an inboard clutch system. So with this saw, you'll be expected to take all this off to get access to the clutch system itself. And let's just show you how that works. Okay, so I'm just going to take the retaining clip off. There we go. And again, just be very careful that it doesn't ping off. And again, I'm just going to use this side case here just to keep all loose parts in. Get the washer off. Here, you can take your gloves off for this purposes. So washer off, and then your sprocket. Okay, so when it comes to the sprocket itself, you'll be asked questions at this point about the sprocket system, okay, what it generally does and how to maintain the sprocket system itself. You'll be expected to know the sort of wear that these sprockets are allowed as well. Okay, so let's a sprocket out the way. And to take off this sort of clutch assembly here, okay, on this saw you've got to disengage the brake band, which will allow you to take this off. Okay, and then just make sure you keep this bearing out of the way there. And this is where now you can start to talk about the clutch system. Okay, when it comes down to the clutch system, you'll be expected to answer how you would take that clutch system off. Okay, and depending on which clutch system you've got on your saw would depend on how you would answer that question. Okay, so that is it to that point. And then we could talk about the brake band and maintaining the brake band, which you take this off here. Okay, talk about how easy it is to actually replace the brake bands on this saw. On other saws it can be a little bit of a pain, but it depends on whether you've got one internally like this or whether you've got one externally on the outer case itself. Okay, so again, answering any questions that the assessor is going to ask you when it comes to all these elements. Okay, and if the assessor is happy at this point, okay, they would then ask you to start putting the saw back together. Once you're happy and everything's been put back together, okay, the assessor then is going to ask you some questions about the exhaust system, okay, what it does, and general maintenance of the exhaust system itself. Okay, so checking all the bolts, making sure it's not sort of wobbly or loose or anything like that. Moving on to the next part of the assessment then. So once they're happy with the exhaust, they will then ask you questions in relation to the bar and the chain. Okay, so let's just get the bar out here. Let's grab it. Okay, so when it comes to the bar, the assessor is going to ask you questions why it's important to maintain a bar to manufacturer's recommendations and the sort of pros and cons of why we would do that. Okay, you then as a candidate will be expected to maintain this bar to the assessment's criteria, and again all this is going to be taught on your training prior to you even getting to this point, so you'll have all this information before you even get here. Okay, once the assessor's happy that you've covered all elements of the bar itself, they will then move on to the chain. Okay, and when it comes to the chain, okay, there's a few questions here. You will be expected to understand the different types of chain that we have available, the makeup of the chain itself, so the different components of the chain, okay, and where to find the correct information so you can get the correct file for the chain size itself. Okay, once the assessor is happy from that point, they would then expect you to put the bar and chain back together and put all the saw back together itself, and then you'll move on from this point into sharpening your chain itself. Okay, so let's go there. From this point then of the assessment, once all the saws have been put back together, bar and chain back on, okay, you can now go into the sharpening side of the assessment. The assessor will be expecting you to sharpen a chain to the sort of manufacturer's spec, Okay, for this you're going to need all the kit here, which is your files, your flat files, and your depth gauge sort of marker here. Okay, and for this saw we've got the 3/16 file. Okay, so what I suggest as well on the assessment is just bring a marker pen, so you'll go around the chain itself, and you'll be picking sort of the worst sort of cutter itself. Okay, and at that point you'll mark it, and it's a good sort of start point then to the chain, and you can move from that point onwards. Okay, straight into the filing. So once all the teeth have been done and you're happy as a candidate that you've done it correctly, okay, you can go into the depth gauges. Okay, here you're going to need the flat file and the marker. Okay, the depth gauge marker, you're going to sit them on. Okay, check, make sure, see if anyone needs filing down, and if they do, from there you'll start filing these down to suit. Check again. Happy. So move on. If it's catching, again, just file it down a couple of times. Again from there, check, happy, and you'll keep moving on again till all the depth gauges have been complete. Okay, and throughout you sharpening your saw itself, the assessor will back and forth just checking to make sure that you're keeping to the correct angles, okay, and the right depths itself. Okay, so from this point onwards, once the assessor's happy with all this, it's going straight into putting the saw scabbard back on the saw and moving to the site where you're going to carry out now the cross-cutting elements of this assessment. So from here you'll move to the site where you'll be carrying out the cross-cutting, okay, of some timber. Okay, at this point you must make sure you got all PPE adequate for the task. Okay, so making sure you got your helmet, your ear protection, some eye protection, so your visor, okay, gloves adequate for the task itself, your personal first aid kit, your chainsaw trousers, and some chainsaw boots as well. Okay, so to start this part of the assessment, the assessor is going to ask you sort of some safety questions in relation to the site that you're on and the task that you're going to carry out. Okay, and depending on what site that is and how it looks will depend on how you answer the assessor at this point. Okay, so once the assessor is happy at this point, they would then observe you going into fueling your saw, okay, and carrying out the safe start checks of your chainsaw itself. So let's go and do that now. So going into your safe starts of the chainsaw itself, okay, so the first thing you're going to do is carry out a cold start on the saw, okay, which we'll do now. Once the cold start has been completed, this is the saw ready to go to carry out your cross-cutting element. let's go there. Now you've done all your safe starts of the saw, we're at the cross-cutting part of the assessment. What the assessor would do at this point, they're going to ask you some questions in relation to tension and compression of timber. Okay, and the easiest way to sort of remember it is just remember tension's sort of on the outside of the timber, and it's where the curve sort of opens up, whereas compression is on the inside, okay, and it closes. Okay, so when it comes down to sort of compression, if you're sort of finishing your cuts off on the compression side, you're more likely to trap the saw. And at this point, if you do trap your saw on your assessment, do not panic. Okay, as long as you carry out the safe method of trap saw procedures, okay, you'll be okay. Okay, so just calm it down at that point and follow the procedures that you've taught on your training sessions. Okay. Okay, so here you'll be expected to carry out 10 different cuts and up to a maximum of 20 cuts itself. All of those cuts will be different under tension and compression. Okay, and you have to also demonstrate bore cuts with the saw itself as well. Okay, so let's go straight into that now on this piece of timber. So once you've completed all the cuts that you need to do as part of this assessment itself, what the assessor will do then, they will ask you some questions in relation to sort of ergonomics and moving timber, okay, and then at that point they will expect you to clean up the site to the site specification of what you're working on. They will watch you do all that, and once you've done it all safely, ask you a few more little questions, and then from that point onwards they'll have a discussion to see how your assessment has gone on that day. We hope this video has helped, okay? This is just a little insight what to expect on a day you turn up for your NPTC chainsaw maintenance and cross-cutting assessment, Okay, all the guides for this assessment will be in the description below. Okay, and before you even get to this day, you're going to have plenty of training. Okay, so I hope this video has helped, and we'll see you on the next one.